Everyone, my name is Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IS English, in which we provide you daily the express analysis of the Indian Express newspaper. Now today is 16th of January 2025, and today we are going to discuss important article that appeared in the Express newspaper, particularly from the perspective of UPSC prelims, mains as well as interview. Now in this discussion we provide you with MCQs that will help you analyze and consolidate your preparation. We provide you mains answer writing questions which will help you develop the habit of daily answer writing, as it is quite crucial if you want to clear mains exam or not. Now in our today's discussion, we'll be dealing with these many articles, and as you can see, US is a subject of one article or the other for many such articles. US has decided to impose curb on Russia's shadow fleet of ships. So this is related to India's GS3, that is energy security, as India, you can understand, is a major importer of Russian manufactured crude oil. Also, this is important from GS paper 2 syllabus, as it deals with sanctions and how India will navigate such sanctions if it were to impact India's energy interest. Also, US President Biden suggested some kind of a ceasefire deal which has now been agreed by Israel and Hamas. So you can see now this has hung. Give me a second. I'll just restart this program again. Good morning, Baga Springs. Good morning, Augustine. Good morning, FTY. Good morning, Krishna. Good morning, Bulbul. Now, as I was saying, US is a subject of second article also, as US President Joe Biden has suggested some kind of ceasefire deal which has now been agreed upon by by Israel and Hamas, and we'll try to understand what kind of ceasefire deal it is, what kind of provisions are there on this deal, and how it impacts the politics of the Levant region. Before moving on to the next question, we'll also solve a PYQ on this very region that appeared in the year 2022. Also, Prime Minister Modi commissioned 3 important ships for Indian Navy yesterday. So we'll try to understand what are the features of these ships and how they will help India project its power in the Indian Ocean region, which you can understand is India's security interest. Also, we'll try to understand for how or why are the plants grown in space, particularly with instance of ISRO's New Crops mission, which undertook in outer space. As we saw, cowpea seeds, also known as lobia in Hindi, they were germinated in outer space in microgravity conditions. So we'll try to understand how ISRO was able to grow these kind of seeds in space and what are the conditions required for such growth. Also, US has now removed curbs on the Indian Bhabha Atomic Research Center, as such curbs, we understand, hampered the implementation of Indo-US nuclear deal, which was signed back in 2005. So almost 20 years has passed, and even today the deal has not been implemented in its true letter and spirit. And what are the reasons? We'll try to understand. And now, why has US decided to remove the Indian government entity called Bhabha Atomic Research Center, which you understand is an important institution for development and of technologies relating to nuclear energy. Also, US has brought a new, why is this happening? Now, US has also brought a new AI export law, which entails a categorization of different kind of countries, and it provides unrestricted access to its AI technology to its own closest 18 allies, whereas India, like many other countries in the world, will be subjected to some kind of a cap, as there will be limits imposed on countries like India beyond which it cannot utilize the US's AI technology. Also, the last article for the day is on the topic of startup ecosystem in India, and it is written by the former CEO of Niti Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant. So we'll try to first of all analyze how the startups have evolved in India and what are its important significance as far as Indian economy is concerned, before understanding government initiatives and also the challenges faced by these startups. So you can see US is a subject of 4 articles today. That is why you can understand US is a global hegemon and its policies may have impact on other countries including India, and that is why it is important from GS paper 2 perspective, from science and tech perspective, from eco perspective, etc. So these are the articles. Now the notes for the session will be available as usual on my Telegram channel called ATS Live. You can search the keywords ATS Live on Telegram, and if you are still unable to find the channel, you can also have an option to scan the QR code, which will take you directly to my channel. Now, before moving on to the articles of the day, let us first get away with the prelims question that I provided you yesterday as a homework with reference to body mass index. Consider the following statement. Body mass index is a simple index of weight for height that is universally used to classify obesity and overweight in adults. This is a straightforward question, as currently body mass index, which is a ratio between your height and your weight, indicates whether a person is obese or not. Also, BMI thresholds for classifying obesity may vary between populations based on regional health and nutrition factors. Now, the World Health Organization categorizes that any person who has a BMI of more than 30 can be categorized as a obese person, but this categorization, it varies based on different countries. As you can understand, countries have a different kind of a health priorities, and also their nutritional levels are different. So any country, if a person has more weight than what WHO prescribes, then it is not necessarily that person will be categorized as a obese person. Understood? So second statement and first statement both is correct. Therefore, option C is the right answer to our yesterday's question. Now, the mains question that I will be taking today before the session ends is on the role of government's initiative, particularly Startup India, in fostering the growth of startups in India. So we'll first of all have to address what are the government initiatives before understanding the challenges that startups they continue to face even today. So this is how we'll try to write this answer in 250 words, and stay tuned for how to write this answer and also understanding the relevant content that you have to put in your answers so as to fetch maximum marks in your mains examination. Now, before moving to, I also published a video today at 8 AM in the morning, which consisted of important current affairs event, particularly from the section of economy which appeared in last month's newspaper. So these kind of monthly current affairs will be put up on our YouTube channel, and the purpose of putting such videos is to help you revise the important events that appeared in the last month. And also these discussions will carry articles which seldomly or rarely appear in the newspaper, and the chances of these articles appearing again in the next few months are low. So it will help you consolidate your preparation and also help you understand the various nuances of rarely occurring news events. Understood? Now, before you take up much of your time, let us start our first article of the day. This one, as you can see, appeared in the Explain section of the Indian Express newspaper. That is page 14, and it highlights that the US has curbed Russia's shadow fleet of ships which were used to transport crude oil, particularly to countries like China and India. Now, what what is the context of this article? Now, the outgoing administration of the US government, which is currently heralded by the President Joe Biden, they have announced sweeping curbs on Russia's oil fleet, imposed sanctions on shadow fleet of tankers, Russian oil companies, insurance companies and other countries who were involved in country's oil sector and trade. Now, such sanctions, you understand, will impact India because India currently is the biggest importer of Russian oil, and that is why such articles are important as far as Indian perspective is concerned and also from the prelims examination. Now, let us try to understand why or the background of how such an curbs or imposition of curbs on Russia will impact India. Now, you understand India is world's third largest consumer of crude oil. However, the demand for crude oil in India cannot be met by domestic production, as India does not have sufficient reserves of crude oil. So as a result, what India does is that it imports crude oil in large number so much so that it is required to meet 85% of its requirement. So you understand, historically and even today, India is dependent on imports of crude oil to meet its domestic requirement. Now, originally, India used to rely on traditional suppliers such as Iraq, UAE, Saudi Arabia. However, when Russia and Ukraine, they got involved into the war, US and other Western countries, they imposed sanctions on trade of Russian oil. And as a result, Russia was forced to lower the prices of its crude oil, and it provided India the opportunities to source crude oil from Russia, which were available at much cheaper cost. So that is why slowly by slowly, from the start of Russia-Ukraine war, we have seen the share of imports from Russian crude oil for India has increased gradually, and now India has become the largest importer of Russian crude oil. Now, in last year, it accounted for about 38% of India's total crude oil imports. So you understand how much Russian crude oil is important for India currently. So this is the background of the event. Now, the Western price caps which were originally imposed on Russia was meant so that the Russia cannot sell its crude oil for more than $60 per barrel rate. Now, the idea for imposing such sanctions and not banning trade of Russian oil altogether was first of all to limit Russia's revenue. As you can understand, whatever revenue the Russia was gaining from selling crude oil, it was channeling those revenues for its war efforts against Ukraine. So, Western countries led by US, they wanted to curb Russia's ability to earn more money. And they also wanted to keep the flow of oil in the global markets growing so that it does not lead to higher inflation in the market. Now, these were the two intentions of why the West, it did not ban the import of Russian crude oil, rather it put a price cap that Russia cannot sell crude oil for more than $60 per barrel. Now, India altogether is not a part of such sanctions regime against Russia, so it did not, or it was not mandatory for India to follow such imposition of sanctions. However, to avoid secondary sanctions by US, India tried to avoid such a deal with Russia. Now, what Russia did so as to increase the prices of its crude oil beyond $60, that it employed a shadow fleet of tankers or oil tankers. Now, these tankers, they are older tankers and they have uncertain ownership, and these emerged as a way to surpass the cap which was imposed by Western countries. Now, Indian refiners, they were buying oil from Russia at a cheaper rate. However, these rates were sometime even beyond the $60 barrel cap that was imposed by Western countries. However, Indian oil refiners particularly, they imposed a condition to Russia that we will import your crude oil, but on the condition that it will be done on a delivered basis. That is, the chartering of tankers, associated procedures of insurance and cost of delivery, that will be borne by the supplier of crude oil and not by the importers of crude oil, that were Indian refiners. Now, India or Indian refiners, what they wanted was not to be involved in any of the shipping related incidents so that it keeps them isolated from any Western sanctions. However, such shadow fleet of tankers that were used, particularly 183 ships, they are now being sanctioned by the current imposition of sanctions by the West. And this shadow fleet of tankers, earlier they were responsible for almost 530 million barrels of Russian crude oil exports last year, out of which 230 million barrels were imported into India. So you understand, this imposition of sanctions by the US now, it will impact India's ability to source crude oil from Russian refiners or suppliers. Now, although you know that, now let us try to understand how or what options does Russia have right now. Now, Russia, first of all, it wants naturally to increase the supply of ships that it can use to transport crude oil to countries like US and China. However, you understand, such ships cannot be manufactured quite quickly as it is a time-taking process. So, it will take some time for Russia to build and start a new fleet of ships. However, till then, you understand, the Russian, whatever crude oil they export through other shipping mechanisms, it will cost much higher for Russian to export it. And this will drive up the prices of crude oil in the global markets. So, the discounts that were earlier available for countries like India when they were importing Russian crude oil, they will not be available right now. Also, the Russia, what it will do that it will try to lower its price of crude oil below $60 per barrel so that it can use the Western fleet of ships to transport its crude oil. However, this can lead to lower revenues for Russia. However, Russia will be still comfortable with such a measure, as importing some crude oil at lower prices is better than importing no crude oil at all. Also, it will be forced to give discounts on its oil supplies to countries because it wants to reduce the prices of its crude oil below $60 per barrel so that it can use the fleet of Western ships to transport it. So this is how the Russia might approach that. There are two options. First is build your ships or build newer ships yourself, which is a time taking process, or till then sell your crude oil at a much lower price so that the Western ships can now take your crude oil to other markets. So these are the two options that Russia have. Now let us try to understand what options do India have. Now you understand India's trade with Russia, particularly with crude oil, will be impacted by such impositions of sanctions by the Western countries. However, it is unlikely to disrupt overall India's oil imports because you can understand India can always source its oil from other traditional suppliers like Iraq, Saudi Arabia and UAE, which were earlier the highest suppliers of crude oil to India before the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, Indian refiners from past few months, they have reduced their oil imports from Russia and rather they have increased their oil imports from West Asia, and this highlights how India can navigate such tricky situations and rather rely on its traditional partners like Iraq, Saudi Arabia and UAE, with which it has good relations, to import crude oils and meet its domestic demand. Understood? Now, this was all for first article. We'll move to another article of the day. This one appeared on the front page of the Indian Express and also the world page, that is 12th page of the Indian Express, and it states that Israel and Hamas, who have been involved in a war after the 7th October attack of 2023 on Israel, which left thousands dead in Israel. And as a result, Israel, what it did, that it invaded the territory of Gaza, which was governed by a radical Islamic organization called Hamas. Now, this war, it resulted into death of many people, as much as 64,000 deaths, which has been estimated by a Lancet study. However, now both of these parties very fed up with the kind of destructions that this war has resulted into, they have agreed to get into a ceasefire deal. So let us try to understand what this ceasefire deal entails, or what are the provisions of this ceasefire deal. Now, this ceasefire deal originally was suggested by the outgoing US President Joe Biden back in April. And this is a three-phase deal. The first phase of this deal includes releasing of hostages and initial military withdrawal by the Israel from the Gaza territory. Now, hostage release will include 33 Israeli hostages. They will be released, and in return, Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners who have been accused of helping Hamas in the past. Now, military withdrawal will also take place, as withdrawal of Israeli forces will take place not from entire Gaza but only the populated areas of Gaza. Now, by the end of first phase, it is intended that all civilian captives, whether they are living or dead, captured both by Israel and Hamas, they will be released. Now, after the first phase concludes, after a period of 16 days from the conclusion of first phase, the negotiations on phase 2 will start, and it is expected that such negotiations will include further release of hostages, particularly hostages who are in the military age or who belong to armed forces of Israel. They will be released. In addition, prisoner exchange will happen, as additional Palestinian prisoners are expected to be released. However, it is important to note that people or prisoners who have been involved in deadly attacks of October 7th, 2023, they will not be released by Israel. Now, phase 2 will complete only after the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from the entire territory of Gaza. Now, you understood, first phase resulted or will complete when Israel withdraws its military from the populated region of Gaza, whereas in the end of phase 2, Israel will withdraw its entire army over Gaza. So, this is how the first two phases will be like. Now, in third phase, after the entire military of Israel will be withdrawn from Gaza, there will begin an effort to reconstruct and provide humanitarian assistance to Gaza, because you can understand from this chart, the war in Gaza has resulted into death and destruction. As many as 46,000 were killed by Israeli forces. The cost of removal of the rubble or debris in the region will take almost $1.2 billion, and the estimate damage to the infrastructure was at the levels of $18.5 billion. So, reconstruction and providing humanitarian assistance, although is necessary to Gaza, but this is a Herculean task which will take a lot of time, and it is expected that the process of rebuilding Gaza will only be completed at the earliest by 2014, which is 15 years from now. Now, this large scale reconstruction of Gaza will be taken or supervised by countries such as Qatar, Egypt, as well as United Nations. Understood? So, this is the three-phase agreement. Now, what are the challenges of implementation of such agreement? First of all, there are two challenges. First is Hamas condition, that Hamas has insisted on complete withdrawal of Israeli military from Gaza territory, and Israel that it declares end of the war, and only then it will release the remaining hostages. Now, you understand the trust deficit between these two governments are quite low, and hence Israel is not agreeing to end the war before Hamas releases all its hostages. Secondly, there is another challenge, which is the political opposition that the Israeli government is facing from its members of its own government. As Israel government, it formed a war cabinet which included members from major political parties. However, a right-wing political party, they have withdrawn their support in protest of the Hamas-Israel ceasefire deal. So, this is how such negotiations are subjected to trust deficit between Israel and Hamas, and also Israeli government is facing political opposition just because it signed the ceasefire deal. Now, let us try to solve a PYQ which appeared in the year 2022 prelims. Now, this PYQ asks what is the term Levant means, which is often heard in the news. Now, why I've put this PYQ at the end of the discussion of this article? Because Levant is the region where both Gaza and Israel are located. So, what is actually Levant region? Let us try to understand this with the help of this map. Now, Levant region is the region located east of Mediterranean Sea, and it consists of countries like Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, as well as Gaza here. Now, it does not include Egypt, so please make sure. Now, it is located east of Mediterranean. So, let us try to solve this question. Region along eastern Mediterranean shores is the right answer to this PYQ which appeared in 2022. Now, let us move to another article. This one appeared also in the explain section, that is on page 14, and the news highlights that Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday, he commissioned 3 warships into the Indian Navy, and these warships are called as INS Nilgiri, INS Surat and INS Vakshir. INS Vakshir is a submarine, and INS Surat and Nilgiris are ships. So, what kind of military facilities do these warships have? Let us try to understand this quickly. Now, first in the sequence is INS Nilgiri, which is actually a stealth frigate. It was built under the code name of Project 17A, and it follows, or it is the first of Project 18A stealth frigates, and it is being constructed by 2 bodies, Margdarshan Shipbuilders Limited, which is located in the city of Mumbai, as well as Garden Reach Shipbuilders, which is located in the city of Kolkata. Now, this Project 17B is a follow-up project of earlier stealth frigates which are now in Indian Navy, called as Project 17A. Now, these are called Shivalik class of destroyers and stealth frigate, and now will be the Nilgiri class, which is the first of the sequence in INS Nilgiri. Understood? Now, this INS Nilgiri, it is a class of ship which was built under the philosophy of integrated construction. What do I mean by integrated construction? That the components of ship, they are assembled in the factory, and after these are assembled, they are brought to shipyards, and then the final assembly of the ship is done quite quickly. And the intention of such integrated construction philosophy is to quicken the process of manufacturing of ship. Thereby, you understand the start and end of construction of ship in this case has been quite quicker. Also, these kind of ships, they are capable of operating in a blue water environment. Now, what is a blue water environment? That is the deep seas which are far from the locations of Indian coastlines, and whenever Indian Navy ships, they are operating far or deeper in the sea, it will allow India to project power at a far more wider areas. Understood? Now, these kind of ships, particularly INS Nilgiri, they have versatile suite of weapons and capabilities, as they can play a multi-role of anti-surface ships, anti-air ships, and also participate in warfare against the submarines. Also, let us now take into account what is INS Surat. Now it is fourth and final guided missile destroyer which was built under Project 15B. Now destroyers are a category of ships which have a high speed and maneuverability. Thereby they have greater striking capabilities and longer endurances, which means these kind of ships are primarily used by Navy for attacking another territory or undertake aggressive military moves. Further, these were designed by Warship Design Bureau, which is a part of Navy's in-house design capabilities, and it is built again by Madgaon Dock Limited, located in the city of Mumbai. Also, the displacement of this ship is 7,400 tons and the overall length is 162 meters, and this ship is equipped with state-of-art weapons such as sensors, surface to air missiles, anti-ship missiles, as well as torpedoes, which makes it good enough to tackle any threat on air, on the surface of water, or even below the surface of waters. Further, these INS Surat, it is the first Indian Navy ship to be equipped with the capabilities of artificial intelligence, as it will utilize an indigenously developed AI technology to enhance its operational efficiency as well as its attacking capabilities. Now, this this INS Surat, it is having modern sensors and communication facilities which make it a key asset in the network-centric warfare. Now, what is a network-centric warfare? Now, there are network of military assets which may be deployed in an operational theater, and the ability of these assets, be it ships, on-ground assets, or even aircrafts, to network and talk to each other and communicate with each other. This helps the overall military theater to operate in one go. Also, the coordination between various naval, military and air assets, they become easier, and hence the military gets a complete picture or the threat perception that the India might face. So this is how network centric warfare is an advanced warfare which utilizes computer systems and AI technology to navigate the challenges which are imposed in the theaters of war. Now, let us try to understand what is INS Vakshir. It is the sixth and final submarine in the Kalvari class of submarines which was manufactured under Project 75I. Now, these Kalvari class of submarines, they are based on the design of Scorpion class of submarines which was designed in joint venture by a French company and a Spanish company. Also, these are diesel electric transmission systems, which means they are powered primarily by diesel. However, the batteries are electric in nature, which needs to be charged periodically, and the intention of building these kind of submarines are that they are attack or hunter killer submarines, which means they are designed to target and sink adversarial naval vessels which might invade or pose a threat to Indian interest. Now, it is one of the world's most silent and versatile diesel electric submarines. It is designed to undertake wide range of missions which include anti-surface, anti-submarine warfare, and it also has the ability to gather intelligence by surveilling and conducting special operations in the area. Further, it features modular construction, which means that such submarines can be retrofitted or modified in future. For example, currently these Kalvari class submarines do not have an AIP technology, but it is expected that such AIP module will be integrated into these submarines in next few years, and it will allow these submarines to be submerged into water for a longer duration. And also, when submarines are underwater for a longer duration, it reduces their capability to be detected by enemy countries. Understood? So these are three important platforms: INS Nilgiri, INS Surat and INS Vakshir, that were commissioned yesterday by the Prime Minister of Modi in the city of Mumbai. Now let us try to understand what are the impacts of such developments for Indian Navy entails. You understand, India is a country which has a long sea coast. Particularly the Indian Ocean region is seen as an area where India wants to project its own power. Now, to deploy its asset into the wider region of Indian Ocean region, you understand India needs to have large amount of ships, submarines, aircraft carriers, etc. Because this area contains of many important sea lines of communication: this Suez Canal, this Bab el-Mandeb, this Cape of Good Hope, Strait of Malacca here, and all of this are important sea lines of communication, and security of these areas are important for the interest of global trade and also for India's territorial and economic interest. Further, we have witnessed the China, it has increased its deployment in the region. So countering the threat of China is also an objective of Indian Navy. And with this new era assets and also the ongoing construction of next generation of warships, Indian Navy will be in a better position to project its power in the entire Indian Ocean region. Understood? Now, which of the following is the best description of INS Surat that was in news recently? Is it a stealth frigate warship? It is not. It was INS Nilgiri. Is it a diesel electric class submarine? It is not. It is INS Wakshir. Is it a torpedo launch recovery vessel? No, it is not. It is a stealth guided missile destroyer which has a displacement of 7,400 tons and it is India's first AI capable ship. Understood? So this is how option C here is the right answer. Now, good morning, Baga Spinks. Can you brief on sanctions? Trying to understand this article overall. Now, Baga Spinks, whenever a country is in conflict with US, what US does is it tries to limit the ability of that country from a political or from an economic point of view. For example, India tried to develop its own nuclear weapons after the Pokhran test. So what US did, that it did not originally wanted India to have that kind of capability, and once India did test its nuclear weapons, it imposed many sanctions on India. For example, India was not able to source space related components from Russia. So this bans any country from participating anything. These are called as sanctions. Now, Bulbul, but Reliance on SimGuard, a deal of Russia tennis. Sorry, Bulbul, I do not understand you today. Now, moving to the next article, but before that, as I tell you every day, you can also watch this session on the link I've provided here. And the benefits of watching this session not on YouTube but on website are many. That first of all, you will be provided notes on the website itself, and you also will have the capability of downloading the video for offline purposes, because in many cases we have seen that there are chances that the connection of internet becomes patchy, and whenever we are live streaming any particular video, it becomes quite irritating for that matter. So the ability to save these videos for future requirements in case, God forbid, the internet connectivity goes away is the ability that you'd want to have, and therefore I am telling you to subscribe to this course, which is available just at a 1 rupee, and also you can practice your learning through MCQs which are presented in a more interactive manner on our website, so it will make your experiences more enriching and more fulfilling. Understood? Now, having said that, let us move to another article. This one also appeared in the explain section on page 14, and it states how or why are the plants grown in space. Now, this article appeared in the newspaper because you understand few days back, ISRO, that is India's Space Research Organization, it was able to grow cowpea seeds in the outer atmosphere, particularly in microgravity conditions. Now, this is a part of CROPS called Compact Research Module for Orbital Plant Study, which was launched on board PSLV C60 mission. It was launched on December the 30th. Now, this CROPS experiment has actually benefited India because the seeds they have sprouted and also have given away the leaves. So let us try to understand first of all, why is actually growing crops such a big deal in the outer space. First of all, you understand outer space, they have microgravity like condition, which means the plants, they cannot grow as usual because plants, they require gravity, and the roots, when they have to take root in the ground, they require gravity as they have to move below. Now, whenever there's a macrogravity like condition, it means the plant's root, they cannot grow downwards properly. Also, the ability of water to trickle down into roots from upper surfaces is due to the factor of gravity, which usually does not happen in space. So this macrogravity like conditions impedes the normal growth of roots and watering of roots with water. Also, space has a high level of radiation levels, and these radiation levels have the potential to damage the DNA of plants and also hinder their proper growth. Further, temperature fluctuations do happen in space, and these fluctuations are not just of few degrees but rather of 100 degrees. So these kind of conditions are actually available in space, that is, space has a higher temperature fluctuation, which is not the case whenever you are growing plants on the ground on earth. Further, scarce sunlight is again the reason, because you understand plant, they require sunlight for the purpose of photosynthesis, but whenever such sunlights particularly are not available in the outer space or away from the sun, this hinders the ability of plant to undertake photosynthesis and naturally use the carbon dioxide to manufacture oxygen. So these are the conditions which impede or create hurdles in the growth of plants in the outer space. Now, how has ISRO navigated such conditions and how is ISRO able to grow the crops? Let us try to understand that. Now, this crops is actually an example of how ISRO has germinated the seed of cowpea, which in Hindi is known as lobia. Now, this crops payload, it was developed by Vikram Sarabhai Space Center located in the city of Thumba in Kerala, and this project was designed to study the growth of plant in microgravity condition and also undertake extraterrestrial agricultural research. Now, this system which has enabled ISRO to grow a plant is a fully automated system which was used to germinate seed and sustain them until the two-leaf process. Now, as a result of this fully automated system, we have seen that 8 cowpea seeds, they were placed in a closed box environment. Now, by putting these seeds in a closed box environment, this allowed the ISRO to regulate the temperatures of the environment under which the seeds were grown. And this was done through active thermal regulation, which allowed the seeds to be grown and the temperature levels from 20 to 30 degrees centigrade, which is very much the temperature levels we see on earth. And also the nutrition to this kind of seeds, they were provided with the help of porous soil like medium, as there was this clay which had a water releasing nutrition or nitrogen fertilizers which were released after the water was delivered to these porous soil like medium automatically, and the delivery of water was controlled not in from the space but from earth. Also, to mimic the conditions of sunlight, ISRO embedded 8 different LEDs into this controlled environment, so that these LEDs, when they are on for 16 hours, they provide conditions for photosynthesis, and they also are off for a period of 8 hours, which mimics a condition of day and night on earth. So this is how, by undertaking a closed box environment with active thermal regulation, regular supply of nutrition through a solid like medium which is porous in nature, delivery of water and light through LEDs, is how ISRO was able to grow these seeds in outer space. Now, the importance or intention of such missions are many. First of all, any country would want to have the capability of growing seeds in the outer space, because it reduces the amount of payload that you have to send with your astronauts, because you understand, to sustain the human life in the space you require large amount of food, and currently these foods are being taken from earth into space, which increases the payload that these space missions will have to carry. Now, increasing payload, you understand, is quite not very cost effective, as it is quite costly in nature, and it also reduces the amount of other scientific experiments that could be conducted in outer space. So whenever the scientists or the space research organizations, they'll have the capability to grow their crops themselves in the outer space, it will reduce the amount of payload by that the scientists will just carry the amount of food that they require until the next level of food are grown in the outer space. Also, this will provide or allow the missions to go on for longer durations, and also it will provide a sustainable human presence in space. Also, there are many other benefits. First of all, that such growth of crops releases oxygen, which promotes the delivery of oxygen there. You need not carry oxygen from the earth. Also, this has the ability to recycle carbon dioxide and organic human waste in space. Thereby, we will reduce the amount of wastage in space also, and it will also use the carbon dioxide which is emitted by humans in the outer space. Further, we have seen that growing plants, whenever scientists, they grow plants on a microgravity situation, it reduces their mental stresses and improves their mental well-being. So the intention primary is to grow these crops in the space, which will reduce the amount of payload which is required to be sent currently into the space. Also, it has many other benefits, that is, it provides oxygen which is beneficial for human environment in the space. It recycles carbon dioxide and organic waste, and also releases stress among the astronauts. So these are the benefits of why organizations like ISRO are involved in growing of crops in outer space. Now moving to next article. This article, as you can see, appeared on the very front page of the Indian Express newspaper, and it states that with nuclear deal in mind, which was passed back in 2005, the US, it has now removed the sanctions which it has earlier imposed on institutions like BARC. Now let us try to understand the context of this article. The US Bureau of Industry and Security, which is a part of Department of Commerce of United States of Government, it has removed 3 Indian nuclear entities, that is Bhabha Atomic Research Center, Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, and India Rare Earth Limiteds. All of these are government-owned entities from its US's entity list. Now, this decision came on the day when US removed 3 Indian entities, but rather it added 11 Chinese entities into the entity list, because the US has perceived that these Chinese companies are involved in activities which is contrary or against the US's national security interest. Now let us try to understand, first of all, why had US put these Indian companies into its entity list. Now India, as I've already told you, tested its nuclear weapon in 1974 and 1998, and it pissed off US by large scale. Now, retaliating to this India's unilateral measure, US, it imposed sanctions on the bodies that were involved in nuclear research activities in India. As a result, these 3 government entities were also put in a list called as US Entity List, which is a list compiled by Bureau of Industry Standards and Security, a part of Department of Commerce. Now, these lists includes individuals, businesses and organizations that are now subjected to export restrictions, and they are also subjected to licensing requirements if they want to import certain goods and technologies. Hence, you can understand this is also a kind of sanction. Understood, Baga Spinks? Yes, FTY PSLV C60 was used as a part of SpaceX mission, and among the payloads of the same mission in which SpaceX mission was carried was the CROPS experiment also. Thank you, UPSC Max. You are my favorite teacher. It makes my day. Thank you, Baga Spinks. Now, as I was saying, this list is compiled by Bureau of Industry and Security, part of Department of Commerce, and it sanctions companies who have earlier prevented or are involved in unauthorized trades of things which may be used in terrorism, weapons of mass destruction programs and other activities which is perceived by US as against its own security interests. So, India's nuclear test, according to US, went against the US security interest, and hence US imposed a sanction by putting names of Indian owned entities into its entity list, and it restricted the amount of exports these companies can do, and it also subjected these companies to licensing requirements if they want to import any goods or technologies from the US. So this is how you understand US imposes sanctions on other countries and other entities. Now decision by the US government to remove these Indian companies from the US entity list is to implement the nuclear deal in true letter and spirit, because even after almost 19 years in fruition, this nuclear deal with Indo and US has not materialized as it was expected. There are many factors, one of which was imposition of sanctions on the Indian government entities. Second is US's decision to not allow manufacturing of nuclear related components in other countries outside US. And the third is India's civil nuclear liability deal, which liabilizes not just the operators of nuclear power plant but also from the equipment suppliers in case any God foreseen event happens in the nuclear plant. So these are the 3 reasons. The primary reason was the India's organization that were placed in US entity list. Understood? Now let us try to solve this practice question. Which of the following statement best describes US entity list? Now is it a list of American companies sanctioned for violating environment norms? No, it is not. Is it a trade agreement framework proposed by United States for promoting trade among G7 countries? Not. The regulatory mechanism for US to monitor and promote sustainable corporate practices among US firms? No. It is a list maintained by United States Department of Commerce to restrict the export of sensitive items to certain foreign entities. It is the right answer. So B is the right answer to this practice question. Now moving to another article. This article appeared 2 days back also, but today's news article, it gave us new information. So that is why we are recovering this article. Now this article appeared on page 13 of the Indian Express, that is the business related page, and it states that the US government has brought a new AI export laws which prohibits the export of US AI related technologies to the nations which are adversarial, particularly China, Russia, etc. Also, it provides unrestricted access of US related technology or AI related technology to its closest 18 allies. Whereas India is placed in a second tier category, that is majority of the nations are in this category, and countries like India which are put in second tier territory, they are subjected to capped use of US AI related technology. Now let us try to understand first of all what are GPUs. These graphic processing units, these are indispensable in use in AI because these provide parallel processing power, have the ability to be scalable, and they also are quite energy efficient. That is why these GPUs, they are used in AI related processes. As you understand, AI relates or requires processing of huge amount of data, and for that you need higher processing power which the GPU provides. Now primarily these GPUs, they are manufactured by two American companies called as NVIDIA and the AMD, both of which are US related, and hence you understand the US nation in general, it has a control over the AI processing power, and that is why not just these companies which manufacture GPUs, but also service providers like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, which have data centers, and these data centers use GPUs, they are subjected to restrictions. However, whenever these companies, they are implementing their projects in other countries, they are not subjected to any restrictions. Rather, there will be some kind of a cap on how these companies can deploy their processing powers in other countries. For example, they can only deploy about half of their total AI computing powers outside US. Also, there cannot be more than 25% of their computing power outside tier 1 countries which are closest allies of US, and also not more than 7% can be there in single non-tier countries. So, although these are exempted from any exemptions, however, there are caps on how much power of their computing they can deploy in other countries. Now, let us try to understand what are these 3-tier countries. The first tier consists of 18 closest allies of US like Italy, Japan, Netherlands, France, Belgium, Canada, UK, etc. And they will have no restrictions on how much they can use UI technology or AI US's technology for its own purposes. Whereas the second tier, which consists of countries like India or the vast majority of countries in the world, they'll be subjected to a limit of how much computing power they can import from American companies. And this is roughly about 50,000 advanced AI chips from US until the year of 2027. Now you understand, India has brought a AI mission called India AI mission, which involves import or purchasing of 10,000 GPUs. So technically, if this were to implemented here, India will be eligible to import more than 50,000 AI chips, which is quite more than what it requires from its India AI mission. However, these caps are subjected to be double if the state such as India, it can reach with an agreement with the US. So you understand, it is trying to restrict its AI based technology only to its close allies, whereas other countries which are not so close to US like India, they will have a limit on how much they can import from US. Whereas the countries which are adversarial in nature, these are tier 3 countries like Russia, North Korea, China, Libya, etc. They'll be almost prohibited from importing any US based technology. So this is how US categorizes countries into 3 tiers. Now, first of all, there are again special provisions with respect to India and China, that is called as general validated end user agreement. That means Indian companies that will be importing the US based AI technology, they can use these technologies for civilian as well as military purposes. However, India cannot use AI based technologies for its nuclear use. Whereas China is concerned, it can only use for its civilian purposes. However, it cannot use it for military or nuclear purposes. Understood? So this is how it provides some kind of an exemption to both India and China. However, the exemptions given to India when compared to China is more. That is why India can use it for civilian and military purposes, whereas China can only use it for civilian purposes. Now, the rationale behind such a move by US, first of all, is that the AI technology, it has a potential for dual use. That means you can use it for socioeconomic benefits such as development in healthcare, education and software sector. Also, the AI technology can be used for developing newer weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons, or even utilized to support cyber attacks in the country. And that is why, to prohibit this dual use, particularly by adversarial nations, US is trying to limit the amount of technology it can provide to other countries. And also, it will prevent adversaries from gaining access to US technology and help US maintain its technological edge, which makes US the hegemon of the world. Now, let us move to the last article of the day. This one also appeared in the Indian Express, particularly on the op-ed page, that is page 10. And this article is written by Mr. Amitabh Kant, who was previously the CEO of Niti Aayog and is currently the Sherpa of Indian Prime Minister in the G20. Also, this article, it highlights that India's startup ecosystem, it has witnessed extraordinary growth in past few years, and because of that, India is now world's third largest hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. And the startups which are recognized by Government of India are more than 1.3 lakhs in number, and they were just 400 back in 2015 and 16. So you can understand this progress of India's startup ecosystem in past few years have been remarkable. So let us try to understand first of all what is a startup, that what is the definition based on which the Government of India recognizes any company as a startup. First of all, these entities who want to be recognized as startup, they have to be opened less than 10 years ago, and also their annual turnover has to be less than 100 crores. So when only these two conditions are fulfilled simultaneously, then only a company will be recognized as a startup by the Government of India. Now, these companies, they want to source their funds and they rely on these funds based on the personal savings made by the founders or the crowdfunding, where the crowd, they themselves provide money to the startups, in addition to relying on angel investors and venture capital to meet their financing related requirement. Now, these startups in general, they have many important role in the Indian economy. First of all, they are responsible for significant amount of employment creation, because India has about 112 million people currently who are between 22 to 26 years of age. Now, to provide employment for these many people, these startups are generating a lot of employment. For example, Flipkart, which revolutionized the way e-commerce happens in India, was a startup and it now employs a lot amount of people. So does companies like Zomato, Swiggy, etc. They give employment to workers, particularly gig workers who are delivery guys in these startups. So this is how these startups can play a role for employment generation in India, particularly when the amount of government jobs in our country are reducing from every year. Also, these play a key role in decentralization of economic growth, because we have seen almost 47% of startups that are recognized by Government of India have cropped up in tier 2 or tier 3 towns. So you highlight the development of startup is not just in metro cities but also in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And this is how the economic growth or the fruits of economic growth has actually percolated to each and every corner of the country. Also, these help channel new investment, because we have seen high net worth individuals like Ratan Tata, Nandan Nilekani, Narayan Murthy, they have invested in startups. For example, Ratan Tata was originally an investor in Ola, was an investor in Lenskart. So was the Hero company that has invested in an electric mobility company called Ather Energy, and that now Ather Energy has come up with own set of EVs. Also, these startups help in research and development. For example, there is this company called New Space India Limited, as this New Space India Limited is responsible for providing Indian Armed Forces with swarm drones and loitering munitions, which will be utilized by Indian Armed Forces in their warfare capabilities. Also, these startups have now democratized the benefits of technology to its own people. For example, we all know Paytm and we use it almost daily. Now, this Paytm came up with a technology called Soundbox, which alerts the user that any amount of money has been paid into Paytm account. So whenever a transaction happens over the Paytm, it alerts the bank account holder that so much money has been credited into their account. So this does away with the need for frequently checking your mobile whether the transaction has gone through or not, and it leaves the time more for conducting the businesses. So this is how the benefits of technology just by the process of innovation has been democratized, and it has been provided to a large section of people. Case in point, this Paytm Soundbox. Understood? So this is how the startups, they are playing an important role in India. Now let us try to understand what are the government initiatives to promote the growth of startup. First was Startup India program, which provided for conditions and opportunities that will help handholding of startups, as it will help startups which are in their nascent stage of development grow into bigger companies. They will be provided by advisory support from the government under the Startup India scheme. Also, the loans which are taken by the startup companies from the financial institutions, they will be guaranteed through the credit guarantee scheme for startups, that in case any startup for any amount of reason is unable to pay the loan to the financial company, this will be compensated by the credit guarantee scheme for startups. So these are intended to increase the formal credit to the startups and also reduce the amount of cost of credit for these startups. Also, the government is providing support for intellectual property protection, that is, whenever startups will have to file patent, trademark, etc., these will be helped by the government, and the process of filing trademark and other intellectual property has also been made quite easy for startups. Further, the startups are now provided expedited exit, that as against the companies who can take about 180 days to exit any business, the startups can only exit the business just within the 90 days. So this is half-end the amount of time for exit, and it has made conditions easier for businesses to grow. Further, the Startup India Seed Fund scheme has also been provided, because you understand startups in their initial phases of development require higher amount of funding, and sometimes due to this lack of funding many startups close. So to provide increased amount of funding, particularly in their nascent stage of development, the government of India is providing Startup India Seed Fund scheme. Now let us try to understand that despite such measures or good measures provided by the government, why is startup, or what kind of challenges are Indian startups facing currently? Now, first of all, that the startup ecosystem in India is facing a problem of limited geographical spread of unicorns. Now, unicorns are those startups who have a valuation of more than $1 billion. Now, generally 80% of these unicorns, they are spread across just 3 areas, that is Mumbai, Bangalore and Delhi NCR region. So although the startups in general are present across the country, but the big startups or the unicorns, they are having a limited geographical spread. Also, there is a lack of women participation in these startups, because although 47% of startups have women directors, however, the role of women in these startups in general, as far as management decision is concerned or the controlling stake is concerned, it is quite low as it is originally desired. Further, the startups, like many companies in India, they face many regulatory hurdles, which increases the cost of doing business, and it also reduces the ease of doing business for startups. So any entrepreneurial individual who wants to start with the hurdles may decide against it, just because there are many regulatory compliances or fulfillment it needs to fulfill. Understood? Now, sorry. Now, access to funding. Also, startups require large amount of fund, which you may have already understood, but currently there is what is called as a funding winter going on, which means the access of funds to startups in general, just because of crunch liquidity situation in India and abroad, they are facing crisis whenever it comes to access of funds, and because of these, many startups have been unable to grow into bigger businesses in general. Also, the amount of intellectual property rights which are granted to startups are quite low, as only 11% of IPR applications filed have been granted permission by the government, and hence you can understand, even with the support of government, the amount of IPR which are granted to these startups are quite low, only about 11%. So these are the challenges which is faced by startups, and despite many such important benefits that these startups have, the challenges are still quite enormous. Now, let us try to solve the practice question. Examine the role of government initiatives like Startup India in fostering the growth of startups in India. What challenges do startup continue to face despite this effort? So, as against every answer, you will start your answer with an introduction. You will highlight that India has over 1,30,000 startups which is recognized, and this was earlier just 500 back in 2015 and 16. So you'll start your answer by giving a fact of how enormous India startup ecosystem has become in the past few years, and this will set up your answer. And you will say that this growth in India startup ecosystem has been given, and this is where the body of your answer starts. That you will start your answer with government initiatives like Startup India, with credit guarantee, with IPR support, with easy exit. So these are the kind of initiatives taken by the government that has led to growth in Indian startup system, and this will constitute the first part of your body. And the second part of your body will consist challenges that startup needs to face or they are currently facing. So the second part will include challenges such as funding challenges, concentration of unicorns. The third will be regulatory hurdles. The fourth will be lack of funding, as I have already told you. So these will be the challenges that you will enumerate in your answer. So theoretically, your body will consist of two parts. First is government measures and second is challenges. And you will end your answer or conclude your answer with the fact that although startups are facing many challenges, but they play a key economic role, that is of employment creation, decentralization of growth, trickling of technological innovation, and this is how you will end your answer on a positive note. Understood? So although any question may ask you anything negatively, but please remember always to conclude your answer on a positive note, as it shows that the writer of this answer has a positive attitude, and it will reflect good whenever any evaluator is correcting your copy. Understood? So this is how you'll approach this answer, and if you have any problem, you can always interact with me on the Telegram channel. And also, if you want to get your answers evaluated, this is the Telegram channel where you can submit your answers and I will evaluate it promptly. So this was all from my side for today. But before concluding this session, this is the practice question that you are required to solve, and I will take up this question before the start of tomorrow's session. So I'll see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Until then, you know the drill. Keep revising, keep analyzing, and more importantly, keep writing your answers.